Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to this new webinar that we're hosting today with a new person that I will introduce just in a minute. Very happy to have you all for this very interesting webinar where we are going to share a lot of great insights and tips on how to manage your PR strategy in the best way possible. As you might know, I'm Julie, Customer Success Manager at Folk, and I will let Sarah introduce herself as she will be the one sharing the amazing insights regarding the PR strategy.
Thanks so much, Julie. So I'm Sarah. I work at Hexa. I'm the comms lead at Hexa. For those who don't know Hexa, we are home to startup studios, to 3 startup studios, e-founders, logic founders, and 3 founders. So we launch companies, we partner with entrepreneurs, and we launch companies together with them. And so basically my role is I accompany all of our startups, all of our founders on everything PR and comms related. So anything from content strategy to social media to PR. I'm here today to talk about PR. I've helped a lot of PR, a lot of startups with PR for lots of fundraisings, product launches, product hunt launches, just everything in between from seed to Series A to Series C. So it's something I've done again and again and again, and I've been using Folk all along throughout that process. I can maybe start by showing you guys how I use Folk for those PR, for that PR process, how I manage my list of journalists at Hexa, how I collaborate on Folk with other people, and how I reach out to the press using Folk. So we can get started.
Awesome.
All right, I'm just gonna share my screen. All right. Here we go. I hope you can all see my screen. So this is a fake list with fake names because we didn't want to reveal too much of our secrets. But so here's what it looks like. This would be very similar to the list I use. And I kind of wanted to get started maybe on something that I feel is like probably one of my most favorite feature when it comes to Folk and when it comes to that whole process with managing journalist relationship. And for that, actually, I'm going to switch to LinkedIn. And I just wanted to show you guys how to add a journalist from LinkedIn or from Twitter, from any kind of source into Folk. In my day-to-day, something that I do quite a bit is that, when I see an article online that I found really interesting, when I see a tweet that's really interesting, and I find a journalist that I've never heard of before, what I usually do is that I click on it, obviously, and I look at it, and then I add it onto Folk, which makes it super easy. So here we go with Mike Butcher from TechCrunch. So super easy. I have the Chrome extension. I add him to Folk. So here, you have the little screen and everything that pops up. Add it to the list, to my list of journalists, and here I can obviously customize it, add anything I want. Obviously, Mike Butcher at TechCrunch, he writes about tech. I will tag it in that way. I can assign members. I can put in notes. And what I usually do here is that, I would usually like copy and paste, for instance, the little presentation on that person and add it in the notes, would assign it to a team member. And here I would assign it to the press release. So if, I'm doing a launch or there's like a big fundraising announcement for one of our startup, what I usually do in Folk is that I create like a PR kind of category. And for instance, if it's like cycle and like, we want to announce a seed round, then I'll put the journalist in that category so that it's super easy and available. And that's it pretty much. I can add obviously an email address here. It's actually super easy because it's here. Usually also with Folk, maybe I can even enrich the contact and get more information that way. So yeah, it's added into Folk. And then what I usually do is I go onto Folk. And yeah, here we go. So I have the journalist here. And since here, we're going to do Roundtable, I'm going to add that. So it's all good. So yeah, so that's something I use a lot, the extension to add context to the journalist. What I usually find is that just generally speaking, obviously, to have good relationships with journalists and to have relevant interactions with them, what works best is to have all the information of that journalist into the same centralized space. So what I would usually also do is I add also into the journalist, like if I see a really relevant article, I would add it here in the notes. And that's something I've done with other journalists. Like, for instance, this one. I saw that he wrote a really interesting piece on the European tech ecosystem. So what I usually do, and I just go and add it to the journalist, and then I have kind of my single source of truth where all the journalists live and where they have, I've put in like the relevant articles that they've written. I've put in the relevant tags. And so I have kind of a centralized view and each journalist have all that relevant information so that when I go and reach out to them, everything is there and I can have those quality interactions with them, which I found really, really useful. So that's the one. There was also, something that I do a lot as well is that for instance, when one of the partners at Hexa or one of the founders at Hexa have interviews scheduled with journalists. So either it appears automatically onto Folk or I can create a new interaction on the journalist. And so I write, so actually I think there's one here, interview with that journalist, and then all the necessary information I can input. So yeah, just adding kind of like the interview, the date, the description, so that it's all in the same. So I guess, that's what's great about Folk, but that's also what's great about, reaching out to journalists. Like when you're reaching out to a journalist, you want to be sure that you're having quality interactions with them, that you're talking about the latest article that they wrote, or that that they've talked about someone before, and so it makes it very, very easy to have basically all that information into Folk. So that's also a really cool. And then as you can see here, I have all of my tags: tech, venture capital, fintech, retail, future of work. I've basically when I know that a journalist talks about X, I will add the tag onto Folk, which again makes it really easy to have those quality interactions. And here in my PR column, like I said, I have basically all of my campaigns and I've tagged it so that then it's very easy for me when, we're going to announce this fundraising announcement, that I know which journalist to contact for which campaign. So it's kind of, like I said, a single source of truth, which makes it really easy for me. And there's also something I think that, so I used to work, actually before working at Hexa, I used to work at a PR agency. And it used to be a bit of a nightmare to contact journalists. I'm actually surprised that we use Google Sheets to organize all of our list of contacts for journalists. And so whenever we had a client and they had something to announce, we'd have a Google Sheet of all the journalists, and we'd basically copy and paste those Google Sheets for new clients over and over again. So it was all over the place. Like we'd have information scattered everywhere. Like the list was not dynamic. It was copy and paste. Every list was different. It was a bit of a nightmare. And so in my current role, which is in a way a little bit similar because I work on lots of different campaigns, I guess, because we have different startups that I help, different founders. So it's a bit similar in that sense. But what is super easy now is that I basically have the one list. Like I have my one list of journalists, and then I just put them in different campaign. But then when I click on a journalist, I have all that information, the pieces they wrote, the interview they had, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been pretty useful in that sense along the way.
Sorry, Sarah, I'm just interrupting you because we have an interesting question from Satish, who is asking if we're able to track emails with the journalist also. And maybe I can take this one. So the answer is yes. Actually, within Folk, you will have the ability to sync your email addresses with Folk. So you can sync your Gmail accounts or Outlook accounts, depending what email you're using. And by connecting those emails, we will be able to automatically sync all the interactions that you have with your contacts on your email, so that so it is not displayed in this demo account, but indeed on the contacts profile, you will see in the interaction tab, not only the manual interaction that you can manually logging to say that you had an interview with someone, but also all the history of the past emails that you've exchanged with the person, which also make it really easy to know when was the last time you were in touch with a journalist within your email. Cool. So yeah, I'll let you the floor again, Sarah, if you want to continue.
Of course. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, of course, feel free to ask them. I can, obviously this is best if it's interactive, and I can just answer your question as we go along the webinar. So feel free. So I kind of wanted to also touch on something that I feel, and I'll go into that a little bit in more detail right after. I'll just show you a couple more things onto Folk, and then I'll go into more of the PR insights. But there was something I wanted to also highlight was that something I think people forget, that the key to good press relations and getting your startup in the press is not having a tool where you can send mass emails to hundreds of journalists. No, really the key, and that's really coming from experience. Like I've used those tools where you click a button and like it goes out to like 1 million journalists. That's not the way you're going to get your startup in the press. Basically what works really, really well is, obviously like anything, is just, creating those relationships with journalists. They're not just like a contact or a number. They're, real humans. And it's about creating those relationships with them, human to human. So not sending, mass marketing campaigns to journalists doesn't work, but just creating those relationships. And I find really the best way to do that is to just learn a ton about the journalist as much as you can. And this was why, again, obviously Folk is a great tool for that, because like I showed you guys, I can put in the notes all the different articles that person has written. I have like the full history of the emails, of all the interactions, of everything that's been happening. I can add, I see an article, I can just like add that person onto Folk. So it makes it so much easier to create quality relationships with those people. So yeah, that was something I wanted to highlight. So I can maybe show you guys now how to reach out to journalists using Folk. So basically, so in this example, so we're using a Roundtable. So Roundtable is a startup that was launched by the eFounders Studio that's part of Hexa. And so they announced a seed round a couple of months ago where they raised a couple of million. And I used Folk for that campaign to basically manage all those relationships and to send the campaign to the journalists that we had identified, which was very easy. And so basically, so here already the view is created for the Roundtable PR. And what I would usually do, so obviously, first off, you have the whole work of, tagging and like making sure that the journalist is relevant for that campaign. But once you've done all that, so basically I just, select everyone in my Roundtable PR campaign, and I click on message all. And here, so we have, so that's like the email. And so in my templates, I had created, so you can obviously create templates for all of your different campaigns. And obviously, we're talking about PR now, but there's a million of other use cases. And so for PR launch, and so, yep, that's the right one. And here's the campaign, or here's the email that I will then send on. The really cool thing, obviously, wait, it's like review messages. Yeah. So the really cool thing is that, I'll just go back. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll have to start again. But yeah, here we go. PR launch. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, the really cool thing about that is that, like I said, so I just said before, the key to PR is those quality relationships. And mass marketing email is not going to work to get your startup in the press. And that's what's really cool about Folk, is that I get to customize each of the emails, personalize the emails to make sure that, each journalist is not getting just like a template, not getting just the same email that they'll send to everyone. They're getting a personalized email. And I'm able to do that at scale, see, like I'm sending to 32 recipients and I'm able to personalize. So that's also something I've done, and that works quite well using Folk. So that's here for the message. Obviously, I would need to personalize, but just wanted to show you guys that. And so I'll go back and show you guys, basically, once I've sent out my campaign, what I usually do is I use this view, the Kanban view, to make sure I have everything under my eyes to see who's been contacted, who has replied, and so we're in discussion, and who has replied and that is okay to publish the release. So it also makes it pretty useful to kind of know where we are at. Is there anyone that we need to follow up with? Is there anyone who's not interested? And just to kind of have that overall view, I find to be very, very useful. So yeah, I think in terms of the Folk experience, I think that's all my side. Maybe I can now jump in, Julie, on the PR insights that I can share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your experience with Folk. That was a really great way of showcasing how Folk can be used for this PR use case. As you said, there are multiple use cases on how you can use Folk. It could be your fundraising, it could be managing influencers, candidates for recruitment. So it's quite infinite. But that was a great way to showing like the whole workflow of
Mhm.
keeping up to date the journalist list with notes, reminders, the ability to follow up on the pipeline, send like very personalized emails. So thanks a lot for sharing all of that. And yeah, let's use the rest of our time so that you can also share it to the people, like very great insights on yeah, like the whole PR strategy, like how you, like who you should target, how you should target them, and so on. So I'll leave you the floor again, but we can go into that now.
Sounds good. I just saw a question from Loha Costa.
Yes.
How long in advance would you contact as a founder journalist 2 weeks pre-embargo? Yeah, that's something I was just about to get into, but I'll reply now because that could be interesting. So, yeah, I would advise to contact journalist pre-embargo, so meaning before the release of the fundraising or the whatever you want to announce. Usually 10 days is, a good time to do that. 2 weeks, you can also do that 2 weeks. 2 weeks to 10 days, I feel like is a good amount of time. This strategy works obviously for a certain amount of journalists. You need to really target the journalists that you want to target for the 2 weeks pre-embargo. You can't pitch a journalist under embargo. Well, you can't pitch basically like 20 plus journalists under embargo. It has to be a limited amount of people. But yeah, I'm actually just going to get into that. So maybe we can go to the slides. So yeah, I mean, why do PR? Very, very general question, but always good to kind of get the basics. Basically, there's obviously many reasons to do that. Obviously, for brand visibility, to amplify your company's message to a targeted audience, to generate leads, and to have a more direct marketing impact. It's also PR is also a great way to grow your employer branding. I think sometimes we forget about the power. We think about it in terms of like brand visibility and marketing, but really, especially for startups that, might obviously are not necessarily known to the wide world. It is a credibility, you get credibility, increase your credibility. And so people know your startup and might want to apply. And then last one, to increase credibility as a startup. So yeah, I just mentioned that. I think it's especially important because as a startup, if you have you're just starting out, you might not have even raised any funds yet. And so you have no press footprint in Google on the internet, meaning it is very difficult to gain credibility if you don't have that. So that's why it's really, as a startup, I always advise them to think about PR at the very, very early stages to gain that credibility very early on. Even if you think this article and this, publication that might not be extremely relevant to your audience and it's not going to generate, leads after that, that's fine. You should still do PR if you have the opportunity because it will increase your visibility and your legitimacy as a startup. And again, that goes back to what I was saying, but to grow your employer branding and to amplify your message and your branding, it's especially very, very important as a nascent startup. When to leverage the press. So in that example, the Roundtable seed round. So that was obviously a fundraising example, and that is the type of the type of announcement that gets the most media attention. As you've probably seen, they're all over the press. Maybe a little bit less lately, but it's still kind of the go-to. And that will be the easiest way for you to get press. There's also product launches. If it's a bit, if you're launching your product and you haven't had any press for a funding announcement before, journalists could be a little wary. Like, they don't necessarily want to talk about, just a simple product launch if you don't have that credibility and you haven't really been visible in the press before. So product launches works a little bit better if you're an established startup and you already have footprint in the press. Obviously, like if Salesforce tomorrow launches a new product, it will get press all over. If a small little startup launches a product, that'll be a bit more difficult. But it's still, it's always worth a shot. Also, even if, that particular announcement is not going to get press, that doesn't mean the journalist isn't going to read your emails and read about what you've been doing. So it's always good to, keep that relationship going by emailing and reaching out to journalists on these things. There's also, product sales, client milestones. So that's, if, say, you've reached 50,000 users, if you've won a really big client, if you've released this cool new feature, those could be milestones that could be also very interesting to the press. If you're going international, so if you're opening offices and in another country, you're going international, that's also something that could be of interest to the press, local press, your national press, but also obviously the press of the country that you're opening. But with that, you always have to localize your press release and make sure that it has an angle that is relevant to the press you're going to target in that country that you're opening. So just always making sure that press release needs to be localized. Something that's not included here, but is also another great time to leverage the press, is if you have proprietary data that you can share with the press, and big enough of a sample size for it to be interesting. Say, like, for instance, like there's this startup in France, Figures. And so they have, basically what they do is that they have salary information. So they centralize companies all over France, put in the salaries that they give to their employees in the company. And then so they have this centralized database of like salaries per like industry, per role, etc. So they have a lot of data, really interesting data that they can then anonymize and make studies out of, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have that, obviously not every startup or product would have that or would be able to share that publicly. But if you do have that, that can have a really, really, really great impact and can be very, very interesting. And there was just another one.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's actually not even written there. So, but it's a bit of a different format, but I've been talking obviously about press releases. You can also leverage the press if you have an opinion article. You have a really, really interesting angle, something very novel that has never been written before. And you have that article and you pitch it to the press. A lot of media accept pitches for op-eds. And that's also a really cool way to get into the press if you don't have any news and nothing yet newsworthy to announce. And I just wanted to also maybe go over some little tips that I have from my experience, being in touch with journalists for all these startups across the last couple of years. Journalists get a lot of emails, like hundreds of emails a day. They're swamped. When you think about the amount of startups compared to the amount of journalists, it's crazy. They are outnumbered. The startups outnumber the journalists by a lot. And so when reaching out, there's a certain ways to go about it to make sure that journalists reply to you and make sure that journalists will write about you. And that's why I was talking earlier about the importance of quality relationship with journalists. I think that's paramount, and I think that's key to get into the press, and not mass marketing emails, and making sure that you're having real connections with them. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about these insights. I think first off, journalists are always looking for uniqueness. And so that means, how is your startup different than all the other startups that are on the market? How are you different than your competition? What's your value proposition? Like, how are you really changing the world, and not just, another startup that's trying to like revolutionize or democratize this and that. And so if you're able to really articulate that in a way that is convincing and not super long, it has to be concise, I think you have a shot, obviously, at getting a journalist's attention. So really, really work on that pitch of how you're unique and how you will actually change your industry or whatever you're after. So that's something that's really important. They're also looking for expertise. And so and I'm talking maybe there for founders. So if as a founder, you're an expert, I don't know, in fintech or Web3, journalists are really looking for you to be an expert in those topics, because journalists are always looking for experts who can give them insights on the industry, experts who can give them a really insightful quote for an article that they're writing about. So they journalists have, maybe they're even like using folk themselves, but they have like a pool of experts. They probably have, they themselves also have a contact list or a CRM that they use, where they have their pool of expert. And if you can showcase your expertise, journalists will remember you, will put you in their list, will tag you as an expert, and will reach out to you when they want to write something about your area of expertise. So that's something super interesting to have. Third point, is no bullshit. So I was talking about how you have to articulate your message and make sure it's unique. Yes, you have to do that, but you also have to make sure you're being honest, and not, you just lying, or not even lying, but not like over exaggerating about what you're selling. Journalists will see through that. They will know that, like, you're not the next, like, for instance, like, you can't, if you're, I don't know, like if you're an HR tool and you're just like a little startup starting out, like you're an ATS, an applicant tracking system, and everywhere in your little pitch to journalists, you're saying, we're the leading tool on the market, like we have XXS, but you've just been starting out and you have no clients. Like, you have to be humble, and you can't be over exaggerating, because journalists will see through that and not necessarily want to talk to you if you're not being kind of like honest. And then another point is, and it kind of goes back to the whole expertise, is that journalists will want you to go beyond your startup. Of course, your like objective as a founder is to get your startup out there, to get it in the press, but you also have to be able, and that kind of goes back also to the expertise, you have to make sure that you are giving expert advice that goes beyond your startup, that you can talk about your startup, but you can talk about your startup in like a wider context of what's actually happening. So for instance, again, that example of like an HR tool, an ATS, great if you can talk about all of your product features and how great your product is and your ATS compared to the competitor. Yes, but you also have to be able to talk about how your startup is answering wider trends in the HR world. And then, so yeah, I guess I touched on that a little bit. Humility, it kind of goes back to the no bullshit, making sure that, you're humble, and you're being honest with journalists. Journalists are also and always looking for figures. If, say you're announcing a fundraising round, whatever, you're reaching out to a journalist. If you have data about your company, it can be the amount of clients you have. It can be like data on your product how it's being used. It can be anything. Obviously, well, not anything, but you know what I mean. It has to be something related to your product and to your startup, or if you have proprietary data about, wider trends, that's even better. But yes, always think about what can you offer them in terms of figure, and making sure that those figures then match, and you have to be coherent. Like, obviously, if you're announcing like, oh, we have like 50,000 clients, and then 6 months later, you're talking to the same journalist, like, you have to make sure, obviously, you're being coherent with all that. So having figures, but also making sure that they are up to date and they are coherent, and that and it goes back to the humility, that you don't inflate them too much. But yeah, that's also really important to have always in the back of your head. There's no such thing as off the record. This is very true. If you're talking to a journalist, you just have to, and obviously maybe that's less true of, small startups, because any press is good press, but you always have to make sure that, you always have to know that anything that you're talking about can be written about. Even if you think it's like a casual conversation, there's no really such thing as that. Everything you're telling them can be something that they write about in the next article. And then do not talk badly about competitors, also very important. Obviously, you can talk about them. You can say how you differ from them. That's really important, and that's a question they will ask. But do not say anything negative about them. Do not, throw them under the bus. That's a no-no. So yeah, and maybe I'll go a little bit into quickly the Roundtable case study. I mean, I showed you guys kind of like the folk version of it and how I really use folk, but it might be interesting for you guys to kind of also learn about the whole PR, what the goal was, what our angle was, and what the results were. And so Roundtable, again, so they're a community platform for private investments. They are, like I said, they launched out of eFounders about a year and a half ago. And they announced their seed round a couple of months ago. And so I helped them with that to generate coverage for the seed announcement. And so Roundtable is based in France, but they're also highly European. They're actually, are very much also in the Benelux. So we wanted to target general media, of course, tech media, and specialized finance media throughout all of Europe. The angle was especially interesting because they were raising 3 million, not with like a big venture capital fund, but with 100 business angels across Europe, which is especially interesting because their whole startup, their whole product is about enabling communities to co-invest together. And so that's basically what they did. And the business angels actually used their product to co-invest. And so the angle in itself had a lot of interesting elements to it. And again, and like that's something I was just talking about, if you're going to pitch a journalist, you have to have an angle that's unique. You have to reach out to them with something that's quite different. And if if it's going to be a fundraising announcement, it has to be something that's a bit more unique. And this was obviously unique because they were not raising with VCs. It was 100 business angels, and it was business angels across all of Europe. So we obviously highlighted these things very much to all the journalists that we pitched. And so, yeah, in terms of the results, it was a great success. We managed to get lots of media across all of Europe. So Sifted, TechCrunch. We had some media in Belgium as well, in France as well. And in terms of business, going back to what I was saying at the very beginning, it obviously got them some qualified leads, which was especially great for them. And obviously, great brand visibility, all that I was saying at the very beginning on why PR is important and can really greatly benefit your startup. So yeah, that's I don't know. I think there's some more questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say that there is one question from Wes, was asking if journalists willing to hear that the experts are wrong. I'm not 100% sure about this question.
Yeah, I do not work. In other words, journalists willing to hear that the experts are wrong. Yeah, I mean, if you have maybe an example, because it's kind of hard to know. I mean, obviously, I feel like if journalists want to write about the fact that some experts are wrong, they're going to need proof. But yeah, I don't really have the context, so it's a bit difficult to answer. But if you can provide more context, I'd be really happy to answer that.
Awesome. I don't think we have more questions. So I think we can wrap it up now. But anyway, if you have questions that you didn't get time to ask, feel free to just ask them through LinkedIn, and with Sarah, we'll take time to answer them. Also, if you want to reach out to us for more in-depth insights, question anything regarding the PR strategy or the folk usage for the journalists, feel free to do it. We'll be very happy to provide you any additional information. And maybe what I just want to say, thank you so much, Sarah. This was super interesting. So thanks a lot for taking the time to join me on this webinar. That was really great. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks for having me, Julie. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions you guys may have. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks.